Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to We Were There. It's very nice having you with us. My name is Judith Pucci, and I am a 9/11 Tribute Museum walking tour guide, as are the two gentlemen next to me. We at Tribute all have a personal connection to the attacks of September 11th. We are family members, first responders. Some of us were in the towers and survived. Others of us, including me, lived in Lower Manhattan, and some of us volunteered during the cleanup. So our stories do go beyond the historic events of that day, and they explore much more the personal costs of September 11th. So you're going to hear two of these stories this afternoon, and they're going to be told to you by Peter Budwinski, who is sitting directly next to me, and Dan Pontecorvo. Now, Dan was a New York City firefighter for 23 years. But on September 11th, he had already retired from the fire department, and he was then working for Con Edison. Con Edison is the company that supplies gas and electricity to almost everyone in New York City. Peter is a senior accountant and a longtime employee of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The Port Authority, among many of its other duties, is the entity that manages the World Trade Center. You will hear first from Dan. Before you do, I just want to explain to you a phrase that you're going to be hearing, and it is the pile. The pile is the name that was given to the broken remains of the World Trade Center. The pile was steel, glass, rebar, concrete, everything that was the World Trade Center. Broken hills and valleys of this. Fires burned beneath the pile for about 3 to 4 months. It took just about 9 months to clear everything away. When Dan arrived at the Trade Center, it was just after the towers had collapsed. And when he did, what he heard was a series of chirping sounds. And you're going to hear them in just a few moments. These chirping sounds, and there was a massive quantity of them, they were distress signals. They came from an alert device that firefighters wear. When these devices go off, what it means is a firefighter is down, immobile, and on September 11th, they were underneath the pile, and they were very likely either unconscious or dead. And so that is what Dan arrived to when he got here and faced the pile. It's all yours, Dan.
Good afternoon. Thank you. On the September 11th, just before, probably a month or two before, I just retired from the fire department, 23 years. I was an officer dealing with hazardous materials and terrorism. I had a great opportunity for a career change. And the two careers crossed paths in between 9/11 there. So after 23 years, I worked in Con Edison as a first responder dealing with chemicals, hazardous materials, PCBs, asbestos, fire explosions, transformers, fires, and so forth, as a fire person for Con Edison. Just a month into the job, on September 11th, I got to work early, just a mile from the site. And recall a clear day, beautiful day, and I got my work ready to go, do inspections on various chemical plants and generating stations. And around that time, at 8:45, 8:46, as the plane hit, I heard commotion outside my hallway on the 11th floor of our 33-story building. Went to follow the path of the people, and I saw smoke pouring out of the first tower. Couldn't believe my eyes at how can a plane clearly hit this building on a clear day. Thought of maybe an accident or a heart attack, but soon to be believed, after a couple of minutes later, a second plane hit, and then when everything turned to gray and horrifying things that I heard, people collapsing, screaming, and so forth. I tried to call my wife, but it was impossible because I had the pager. I had no cell phone, and the pager went dead. I told my boss I'm going to a local firehouse down the block. to find out if there's something I could do, because they were told to leave our building, go home, and take care of your loved ones. My kids were in school, first day of school that day. So I went downstairs to a local firehouse to help out, and I saw many of the members already left, the company already left, but there's a few members still there. And I tried to help out in collecting names of members coming in. It was the first time in 150 years that we had a total recall of 14,000 firefighters. As members coming in, I was taking their names and badge numbers for accountability for them to go down to the site. Then I heard commotion in the kitchen, and they said the towers just fell, which was hard to believe that these buildings were put up in 7, 8 years, went down in 10 seconds. It was horrifying to see, knowing that there were thousands and thousands of people, not only civilians, but responders. I wanted to leave to respond down there. I felt my commitment to go. So I got relief. I took my response vehicle and my bunker gear and drove. I got my gear. I started driving down south on the West Side Highway. I had to assume the second tower came down because I saw a tsunami of grayish cloud rolling up the city. It turned to dark. I quickly stopped and I got my gear and I started walking south to make my way through the maze of people who were all in gray colors. Once you get to the pile, I was trying to make heads and tails where these buildings and other buildings around the complex were destroyed, fires, you saw plane parts into other buildings. It was like Armageddon. I never seen something, I never were in war, but I felt there was a war zone here that from the eye can see. Buildings were scarred with steel, concrete on fire. It was just chaos all around. I quickly tried to get my way to the area. There was no command control. I'm assuming that many of our command officers were perished that day as well when the towers came down. So I saw a lot of maze of people, responders, recovery workers, civilians, just all over the place on various levels of the pile. And the pile was multiple piles of maybe 70 to 80 feet high. Smoke pouring out of it. It was just chaos there. As Judy said, I got to the pile, so members in various areas searching and starting a brigade called the Bunker Brigade and taking pieces of building parts into buckets and have a row of people just passing it along the way, which was really strange, you know, of this massive building, people taking just pieces of parts of the building. Probably there for 20 years, they kept doing that. But I got to a pile to try to help out, and I'm hearing this chirping sound. You hear in the distance there, it sounds like a smoke detector, but these are devices that goes off when you turn on your air pack. And it's like 95 decibels. It's really powerful sounds indicating of a down firefighter. And it was hard to believe that you couldn't find those devices. It was pretty high up. You hear them echoing all over the place. It was going on for maybe 6, 7 hours. I got there a little bit after 1 o'clock, probably 1:45. I stood there till maybe 6 hours. The things I saw, I probably don't want to describe. It was really things that I never can imagine finding in my 23 years. I go off the pile around a little bit after 6:30-ish, with sun was setting, and made my way up north for some medical care, and then found Con Edison had a mobile command bus there ready to help out. And I got there and assumed command to start working 12-hour shift for the next 6 months. I'm working 6 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning for the next 6 months. Our job as utility was to power the infrastructure. We ran some 38,000 miles of utility wires for light stanchions, generators, and so forth. We lost a major substation in Tower 7, which carried over 250,000 gallons of hydraulic fuel. So that was burning. A few days later, found out that the gentleman who hired me was a vice president. Dick Morgan was a VP for Con Edison. He was emergency management. He hired me just a month before. He perished that day. So we lost one utility worker that day as well. After 5 or 6 months on the pile, I never came back to the site again. The things I saw in those 6 months was something that people never see in their lifetime. After I retired from Con Edison some 15 years, a couple of years ago, I made my way down here and found people like Judy who suggested to just maybe become a volunteer. And that's what I'm doing right now, so thank you so much.
Dan mentioned that there was a power substation under Tower 7. The World Trade Center was 7 buildings in total. The Twin Towers were the 2 famous ones. All 7 buildings with the Trade Center were destroyed that morning. So that's what made up the pile. He also said something very quickly. Some of you may have picked it up. He said it was hard to believe that those 2 towers, the Twin Towers, that took years to build came down in 10 seconds. Each of the towers was 110 floors, and that morning each of those buildings did collapse in 10 to 12 seconds. And that is basically what created the pile. And it was the collapsing of the towers that destroy, either in whole or in part, almost every other building on the site. Now, as first responders were rushing to the Trade Center, Peter was in the North Tower, and he was on the 69th floor of that building. And that was about 20 floors below where the first plane had entered. So he and his co-worker, John, were very close to where the plane had entered the building. John, however, was a quadriplegic. So what I'd like you to do now, just for a moment, is imagine yourself in a wheelchair, in a skyscraper that is under attack, on fire. Elevators are not available to you. So there are now 69 flights of stairs between you and safety.
Thank you, Judith. Welcome, everyone. There's some things that happen during your life that you can never forget. One of those occurred 17 years ago, just to the west of where you're sitting, at my workplace, One World Trade Center, where I worked on the 69th floor. 4 terrorists hijacked a plane and flew it into our workplace at One World Trade Center. I was fortunate to survive, so let me tell you a little bit more about my September 11 story, which is really our September 11 story. You see, I'm from New Jersey, and I began working at the World Trade Center a couple of years after graduating college. When I went to work, I used to take a past subway train that arrived underneath the World Trade Center, and then I took 2 escalators and 2 elevators to get to my office on the 69th floor. The view from the 69th floor was awesome. There was also a concourse of stores for shopping, and there was also a plaza area where there were music days and Broadway play presentations. So really, the first 15 years working there were wonderful years for me. Then the bombing happened in 1993 and was a real game changer. Death and destruction had now come to World Trade Center. It was Friday, February 26th, about 12:15, when the bomb exploded. We entered a smoke-filled staircase, and we only reached to the 47th floor, where we stayed for hours. I finally exited World Trade Center about 6 p.m. that evening to a very chaotic scene. Eventually, we were allowed to return to the World Trade Center about 6 weeks later. 8 good years followed, and then World Trade Center was attacked again. Our September 11 story involves my quadriplegic friend John, who I worked next to for many years on the 69th floor, and also 9 coworker buddies. I used to arrive at work early, so on September 11th, I was at my desk at 8:46 in the morning when the plane struck Tower 1 about 20 floors above me. There was no fire or smoke on my floor or anything falling from the ceilings or the walls. What I experienced is what I heard and what I felt. I heard the sound of crunching steel as the building began to violently shake back and forth. Once I got up from my chair after being thrown onto my desk, I felt the floor rolling as I began to wander in shock, not knowing what to do. I remember whispering to myself, is this where it all ends for me? Is this where I die? But I didn't die. The building righted itself, and it was time to evacuate. Although he was now working on the other side of the floor from me, I knew my friend John was an early arriver at work like me, and I knew that after the plane struck the building, that John would need help to evacuate. So as I'm going over to the other side of the floor to try to find John's evacu chair, who do I bump into in the hallway but John? But it's not good. John's just staring ahead, seemingly in shock. So I ask him, where's his evacu chair? He waves his hand and says, over there. So I go over there, and I do locate the evacu chair. And when I return to John, this great thing happened. There they are, 9 coworker buddies, my friends, Gerald, Peggy, Philip, Richie, Tony, Wilson, and the 3 Mikes, all ready to help with John. And this is tremendous because John's a big guy, and there's no way that I could get him down the staircase alone. So we move John from his wheelchair and strap him into the evacu chair. And we set up a quick plan. 2 guys at the bottom of the evac chair, 2 guys at the top. We would rotate after every 5 floors. And we begin our journey down from the 69th floor, staying to the right because we were slower and others were passing us. We move well down the staircase until we reach the floors of the 40s. Then we encounter our first obstacle, a lot more heat. It was at the 44th floor that we decided to change staircases, and it was a good move because the other staircase we went into was cooler. Then at the 34th floor, we encountered the firefighters and operations people walking up beside us, trying to rescue others. Some of the firefighters were slumped against the side of the staircase. They're just trying to catch their breath. Others were encouraging us to continue moving down. These were true heroes with great courage. And then on the 21st floor, when the police took us off the staircase and onto the floor, it was a police command center floor. They asked us to leave John with them, and we say no, we had gone that far with John, and we'll continue to move down with him the rest of the way down. While we were on the 21st floor, another tremendous vibration sounding like a bomb goes off. Tower 2 is crashing down nearby, and our evacuation is now more urgent. Then our one real frantic moment occurs when we were stopped in the staircase at 10th floor. Our group and the others behind us start to panic a little, and we're calling down to get moving. We shortly do begin moving, and our team sticks together, just as we did from the very beginning, rotating positions with the evac chair every 5 floors. Then we finally exit One World Trade Center at about 10:15 in the morning through broken glass, into the lobby, and into the street, an hour and a half after the plane had struck. But when we exit into the street, it's a ghost town. We don't see anyone around, and Tower 2 is down. So we begin moving north on West Street, and then glancing up through the haze at the top of our tower, we see jumpers coming down. Sometimes they're with their arms stretched out, sometimes they're holding the hand of a partner. As World Trade Center workers, it was a tremendous hurt for us. All they did was come to work, and now they're dying. The memory of others dying that way will always be painful. And then we hear this roaring sound and see this large advancing cloud. As Tower 1 comes crashing down, it all happens in seconds. We carry John and we run for our lives across the West Street into the Stuyvesant School. We close the door and we look through a small window in the door, and we see it turn gray, then very gray, and then black. And we're half in shock, almost disbelieving what we've experienced in less than 2 hours. So what did our group really do on September 11th? Did we rescue a paralyzed individual? Did we help a coworker and friend who needed our help? Did we provide a good example of teamwork and persistence for kids and others? Did we simply do a good deed? Did we have God's help or good luck? Or did fate intervene for all of us to survive by less than 15 minutes? I don't know, but what I do know is this. Life brings you to certain places and with certain people and at certain moments. When Destiny brought our group together on September 11th, there were no second thoughts. We just teamed up to help John. So for all the firefighters who encouraged us, for all the people we saw jumping from the tower, for all those who died that day, for all the innocent lives that continue to be taken by terrorism, I hope our group was one proof, one small example, that the terrorists did not completely win on September 11th. Humanity won too. Humanity will always win, so keep sharing your humanity, because one world is enough for all of us. Thank you.
The evacu chair that Peter and the others used to carry John, it's actually here in the museum if you'd like to see it. It's downstairs in what is called the historical exhibition. So if you go into it, it's just opposite the historical exhibition, the red fire truck. So if you go in there and you can't find it, just ask someone from the museum who's in there and they'll point it out to you. I would just like to thank all of you. You came here and you chose to spend some of your time with us, and we greatly appreciate that. I would like to invite all of you. We're running just a little tight today, so if you have any questions or you'd like to continue this as a dialogue, the boys will be right outside the exit, so please feel free to approach them. They're very approachable. And again, thank you all very much.